If any priest or theologian could have but one glimpse of the things that Edwin, Ruth, and I saw here, he would never say again, as long as he lived, that God, the Father of love, could ever condemn any mortal to such horrors. The same priest, seeing these places, would not himself condemn anyone to them. Is he more kind and merciful than the Father of love himself? No, it is man alone who qualifies himself for the state of existence after he passes into spirit. The more we saw of the dark lands, the more I realized how fantastic is the teaching of the Orthodox Church to which I belonged when on earth, that the place which is referred to as eternal hell is ruled over by a prince of darkness, whose sole aim is to get every soul into his clutches, and from whom there is no escape once a soul has entered his kingdom. Is there such an entity as the Prince of Darkness? There might conceivably be one soul infinitely worse than all the others, perhaps, it will be said, and such as he could be considered as the very king of evil. Edwin told us that there was no evidence whatever of such a personage. There were those from the upper spheres who had traversed every inch of the lower realms, and they had discovered no such being. There were also those whose knowledge was prodigious, and who positively affirmed that the existence of such a person had no foundation in fact. Doubtless there are many who, collectively, are a great deal more evil than their fellows in darkness. The idea that a king of evil exists whose direct function is to oppose the king of heaven is stupid. It is primitive and even barbaric. The devil, as a solitary individual, does not exist. But an evil soul might be called a devil, and in that case there are many, many devils. It is this fraternity, according to the teachings of one Orthodox Church, that constitutes the sole element of spirit return. We can afford to laugh at the absurdities of such teachings. It is no novelty for some wondrous and illustrious spirit to be called a devil. We still retain our sense of humor, and it causes us very great amusement sometimes to hear some stupid priest, spiritually blind, professing to know about things of the spirit of which, in reality, he is totally and completely ignorant. The spirit people have broad backs, and they can support the weight of such fallacious rubbish without experiencing anything but pity for such poor souls. It is not my intention to go into further details of these dark spheres, at least not at present. The Church's method of frightening people is not the method of the spirit world. Rather would we dwell upon the beauties of the spirit world and try to show something of the glories that await every soul when his earthly life is ended. It remains with every single soul individually whether this beautiful land shall be his lot sooner or whether it shall be later. We held a short consultation together and decided that we should now like to return to our own realm. And so we made our way back to the land of mist, passing quickly through, and once again we were on our own heavenly country, with the warm, balmy air enveloping us. Our new friend of the dark realms then left us after we had expressed our thanks for his kindly services. I then thought that it was high time I went to have a peep at my house, and so I asked Ruth and Edwin to join me, as I had no wish to be alone or separated from their pleasant company. Ruth had not yet seen my home, but she had often wondered, so she said, what it would be like, and I thought that a little of the fruit from the garden would be most acceptable after our visit, short though it was, to the lower realms. Everything in the house was in perfect order, as I left it upon going upon our travels, as though there were someone permanently looking after it. Ruth expressed her complete approval of all she saw, and congratulated me upon my choice of a home. In reply to my query as to the invisible agency that was responsible for the good order of the house during my absence, Edwin answered me by himself asking the question, "What is there to disturb the order of the house? There can be no dust, because there is no decay of any sort whatsoever. There can be no dirt, because here in spirit there is nothing to cause it. The household duties that are so very familiar and so very irksome on the earth plane are here non-existent. The necessity of providing the body with food was abandoned when we abandoned our physical bodies. The adornment of the house, such as the hangings and the upholstery, do not ever need renewal because they do not perish. They endure until we wish to dispense with them for something else. And so what remains that might require attention? We have then but to walk out of our houses, leaving all doors and windows open. Our houses have no locks upon them, and we can return when we wish to find that everything is as we left it. We might find some difference, some improvement. We might discover, for instance, that some friend had called while we were away and had left some gift for us, some beautiful flowers perhaps, or some other token of kindness. Otherwise, we shall find that our house bids us welcome itself and renews our feeling of being at home. Ruth had wandered all over the house by herself. We have no stupid formalities here, and I had asked her to make the whole house her own whenever she wished, and to do whatever she liked. The antique style of the architecture appealed to her artistic nature, and she reveled in the old wooden paneling and carvings, the latter being my own embellishments of the past ages. She eventually came to my small library and was interested to see my own works among the others upon the shelves. One book in particular she was attracted to, and was actually perusing it when I entered. The title alone revealed much to her, she said, and then I could feel her sweet sympathy pouring out upon me, as she knew what was my great ambition, and she offered me all the help which she could give me in the future toward the realization of this ambition. As soon as she had completed her inspection of the house, we gathered in the sitting room, and Ruth asked Edwin a question, which I had been meaning to ask him myself for some time. Was there a sea somewhere? If there were lakes and streams, then perhaps there was an ocean. Edwin's answer filled her with joy. Of course there was a seaside, and a very beautiful one, too. Ruth insisted upon being conducted there at once, and under Edwin's guidance we set forth. We were soon walking along a beautiful stretch of open country, with the grass like a green velvet carpet beneath our feet. There were no trees, but there were many fine clumps of healthy-looking shrubs, and of course plenty of flowers growing everywhere. At length we arrived at some rising ground, and we felt that the sea must be beyond it. A short walk brought us to the edge of the grassland, and then the most glorious panorama of ocean spread out before us. The view was simply magnificent. Never had I expected to behold such sea. Its coloring was the most perfect reflection of the blue of the sky above, but in addition it reflected a myriad rainbow tints in every little wavelet. The surface of the water was calm, but this calmness by no means implies that the water was lifeless. There is no such thing as lifeless or stagnant water here. From where we were, I could see islands of some considerable size in the distance, islands that looked most attractive and must certainly be visited. Beneath us was a fine stretch of beach upon which we could see people seated at the water's edge, but there was no suggestion of overcrowding. And floating upon this superb sea, some close at hand, others standing a little way out, were the most beautiful boats, though I think I'm not doing them full justice by calling them mere boats. Ships would be more opposite. I wondered who could own these fine vessels, and Edwin told us that we could own one ourselves if we so wished. Many of the owners lived upon them, having no other home but their boat. It made no difference. There they could live always, for here it is perpetual summer. A short walk down a pleasant winding path brought us to a sandy seashore. Edwin informed us that it was a tideless ocean, and that at no place was it very deep by comparison with terrestrial seas. Storms of wind being impossible here, The water was always smooth, and in common with all water in these realms, it was of a pleasantly warm temperature that could occasion no feeling of cold or even chilliness to bathers. It was, of course, perfectly buoyant, possessed no single harmful element or characteristic, but it was, on the contrary, life-sustaining. To bathe in its waters was to experience a perfect manifestation of spiritual force. The sand upon which we were walking had none of the unpleasant features associated with the seashore of the earth plane. It was never tiring to walk on, although it had every appearance of sand, as we had always known it. Yet to the tread it was firm in consistency, although soft to the touch of the hand. In fact, this peculiar quality rendered it more like well-kept lawns to walk on, so closely did the grains hold together. We took some handfuls of the sand and allowed it to run through our fingers, and great was our surprise to find that it lacked every trace of grittiness, but seemed to the touch more akin to some smooth, soft powder. Yet, examined closely, it was undeniably solid. It was one of the strangest phenomena we had met so far. Edwin said that was because we had, in this particular instant, carried out a more minute examination of what we were beholding than we had done hitherto in other things. He added that if I chose to make a close scrutiny of all that we saw, whether it be the ground we walked on, the substance of which our houses were made, or the 1,001 other objects that go to make up the world of spirit, we should be living in a state of continual surprise, and there would be revealed to us some small ideal, but only a very small ideal, of the magnitude of the great mind, the greatest mind in the universe, that upholds this and every other world. Indeed, the great scientists of the earth plane find, when they come to live in the spirit world, that they have a completely new world upon which to commence a fresh course of investigations. They begin de novo, as it were, but with all their great earthly experience behind them, and what joy it brings them, in company with their scientific colleagues, to probe the mysteries of the spirit world, to collect their data, to compare their new knowledge with the old, to record for the benefit of others the results of their investigations and discoveries. And although they have the unlimited resources of the spirit world upon which to draw, and joy is in their hearts, our little experiment with the sand led us to place our hands in the sea. Ruth fully expected it to taste of salt, but it did not, much to her surprise. As far as I could observe, it had no taste at all. It was sea more by virtue of its great area and the characteristic of the adjacent land than anything else. In all other respects, it resembled the water of the brooks and lakes. In general appearance, the whole effect was totally unlike the earthly ocean, due, among other things, to the fact that there was no sun to give its light from one quarter only, and to cause that change of aspect when the direction of the sunlight changes. The overspreading of light from the great central source of light in the spirit world, constant and unmoving, gives us a perpetual day, but it must never be assumed that this constancy and immobility of light means a monotonous and unchanging land or seascape. There are changes going on the whole time, changes of color such as man never dreamt of until he comes to the spirit world. The eyes of the spirit person can see so many beautiful things in the world of spirit that the eyes of incarnate man cannot see, unless he be gifted with the psychic eye.